Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to today's episode of A Healthy Curiosity. I'm your host, Brody Welch, and today we're going to be talking about insomnia, anxiety, and pain with Beverly Meyer. She is someone who is a practitioner, a podcaster, a blogger, and someone who's struggled with her own health issues for a number of years. And her podcast, Primal Diet, Modern Health, and her blog on diet and health, which are the top 5 in Paleo magazine's best of. She's a well-respected leader in the field, and she's done a lot of investigation into the neurotransmitter GABA and why it's so important for our nervous systems and why it's important in health in general. So I am super excited to have her on the show today to explore this really underappreciated neurotransmitter and what it can do for us. So welcome to the show, Beverly. Thanks so much for being willing to be here.
Yes, thanks for inviting me on. Glad to be here.
How did you get into the work that you're doing?
Well, I'm 65, and this whole diversion of my life started in the early 70s. I developed herpes as a, young, new, sexually mature teenager back after college, in those days. And hardly anybody even knew what that virus was at that time, much less how to treat it. And they still don't really know how to treat it. But that started me on a search of trying to find, well, how come somebody doesn't have an answer for this? What is wrong with you people? And somewhere along the way, found a very obscure person that did a really interesting type of muscle testing. And I mean, even by today's standards, he'd have been out there. And I was just fascinated with what he did and how much he helped me with, a couple of, I think with some chlorophyll and a probiotic and something, just some minor things. And that was my awakening right there as a young woman, like, wow, the doctors don't know everything. There's other people out there doing strange things that know stuff too. And, but I've struggled with my health all my life, really every day. That's how I got into this field. I had a career in big business and very successful career. I've been written up in Glamour and Entrepreneur and Venture and Inc. and all this stuff, but my own body has never been able to keep up with my brain. My brain is smarter than my body or something. I don't know. But repeatedly exhausting myself and eventually just bagging it on that and changing my life to study what would get me well. And along the line, well, gee, why don't I start sharing this with people? And I made that change in the 80s. So I've been doing this a really long time as a practitioner as well as a patient.
I think, first of all, that's really admirable to realize that your health actually is more important than the fame and the acclaim that you were receiving in your former incarnation as a businesswoman of a different ilk. And I'd love to hear some of your most important takeaways along the way. So adrenal fatigue, I know, is something that you were dealing with. And you wrote to me that you still deal with overwork and overworry. What's been important for you along the way?
Probably the first thing I would say to that, and this is one of those very individual things that you probably learn from your parents or, friends or whatever, but in my own experience as a child, in our household, we were not encouraged or necessarily even allowed to speak up about how we felt. Children are to be seen and not heard. And of course, that's very opposite of the way mothering is done and these days and times. But it's been, basically, if you spoke up and had a problem or an issue, I got labeled by my parents early as kind of a hypochondriac kind of person. So I learned to just not ever talk to anybody about what was going on. Unfortunately, I've never been a well person. So this is something I have to encourage, my clients. It's like, sometimes you really need to go to the doctor. You need to speak up, and maybe you have to go to 10 different doctors to find somebody that says, hey, you know what, let's check your adrenals. Let's run a saliva test, or, hey, let's check for Epstein-Barr virus and run some blood work. And I have to say that people have to be willing to speak up and acknowledge, I'm not doing well and I deserve better. And yes, it can be really frustrating going to practitioner after practitioner and heading off down another path. And believe me, I understand that. So, but that would be the first rule, is speak up. You deserve better. And don't try to do everything on your own, or seeing just, I don't even know how I would classify it, but just like the casual practitioner. Sometimes you actually do need to get to a doctor that has some background in functional medicine.
Right. I think those are two really important points. I heard the statistic recently that it takes an average of 18 years for the latest research to trickle down to the average practicing physician, which sort of doesn't surprise me, which is why seeking out someone who's really up on the cutting edge of functional medicine can be really important. And the other thing, that if you're feeling not well, if you're feeling symptomatic, that's important to pay attention to. And not all medical professionals are willing to listen, but still being your own advocate for getting to the bottom of whatever it is that's going on, that just don't stop kicking over rocks.
Yeah, and to be your own best detective. So not just your own best advocate, which is essential. But you can't just show up and tell people, oh, well, I'm really tired and I get some headaches. Well, get a little notebook out and start writing down, what you eat every day and then how you felt. And gosh, I didn't realize I hadn't had a bowel movement in 4 days. And well, when was the last time that happened? Oh, well, actually, it says right here is that I just ate potatoes all week, and maybe potatoes has something to do with it, or whatever it is for you. You have to figure these things out on your own as much as you can, and make those correlations about, wow, when it's hot outside or cold outside, I don't sleep as well, or whatever it is. We all have our own stack of issues and data, and the more you can organize that for somebody, you're way ahead of the game. Yeah. Being able to track your own symptoms and to get curious about what might be triggering them is absolutely a really important key. One of the reasons that I was interested in talking with you today and excited to talk to you today is because of your work regarding GABA. Because obviously I treat a lot of people who are dealing with insomnia, pain, and anxiety, and GABA is a key player in all of those conditions. And so I'd really, and also as some listeners may know, the first class that I ever developed in terms of my role as an educator, bringing classes online, was on stress and anxiety. And that's where GABA first kind of crossed my radar screen of awareness as something that could be important, but that I did not know a lot about. And so I've been curious about it for years and would love to understand it better. So I'd love to just hear, what do we need to know about GABA? Where can we get it? Why do we need it? And what can we know about it? Okay, well, that's a 4-hour question. So
absolutely. Yeah, right. So,
we'll have to condense that a little, but just so people know, I've got probably at least 10 blog posts and 4 podcasts on this. So, please make use of my website on diet and health. It's a huge website. It's beautiful. It's elegant. It's easy to use. And everything on there is free. There's no ads. You don't have to pay for stuff. It's my passion to provide this public service for people. Having struggled, like I say, for 65, having struggled for 60 years with my own health, people need information and they need it now. And so I do have my online store with supplements, but other than that, there's not like a bunch of ads and stuff all over it. So go there and help educate yourself. All right. So that being said, let's start with GABA 101, or, the forgotten neurotransmitter, as I call it. So There are four basic neurotransmitters is the way that I think about this and hold this. And they're like the four tires on your car. You need four tires that are matching, that are equal in air pressure. They're all pointing the right direction. They're all attached to the car. We need four equal good tires, four equal good neurotransmitters, because two of them I call them the go-go's, and two of them, I call them the slows. All right. So the excitatory and the inhibitory. And like everything else in life, up, down, yin, yang, light, dark, fast, slow, whatever, we need both excitatory and inhibitory. And GABA and serotonin are the main inhibitory neurotransmitters in the body. And these other two, dopamine and acetylcholine, I call the two main excitatory in the good way, the ones that give us energy and focus and thought and memory and like that.
All that good yang stuff. So that the stuff that can be motivating as opposed to the more yin, which you say are GABA and serotonin.
Yeah, and I don't mean the excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate, for example. That is an excitatory neurotransmitter, but it's not one that we want. That's a kind of a problem there when it's in excess. But anyway, so GABA and serotonin as inhibitory, that sounds like, well, gosh, that's going to make me tired if it's inhibitory. But no, because any process that goes on too loud, too far, too long, too much, whatever, things have to cycle off and on, and they need to cycle off and on in rhythm. And a seizure, for example, which is very associated with GABA, seizures are when that electrical flow between the lobes of the brain, left, right, left, right, left, right, that like a metronome, if you're learning to play the piano, left, right. And if the signaling is left, right, left, right, left, that's kind of what a seizure is. And that's what GABA controls, that stability of signaling in the brain. That's the core piece right there, is the stability of signaling in the brain. And then the brain can take its cue of, oh, too much there, and oh, too little there. So these big neurotransmitters govern hundreds of body functions. So some of the more common ones in modern life that we think of are anxiety, insomnia, pain, but there's many, many functions that GABA and its close cousin serotonin play a role in. They play big roles in digestion and your rate of breathing, and whether you have constipation or diarrhea or both or neither, and reflux and TMJ and PMS. I mean, it's just the list is high blood pressure or low blood pressure. It's a staggering list, but that is where you start, is that GABA is that neurotransmitter that's keeping things at a stable, steady pattern. So that's the first piece.
Okay, and you said quite a lot there. So really, it's not specific to just one system of the body. It has a really global effect on everything from blood pressure to menstrual cycles to the timing of things through the digestive system, and having to do with mood.
Absolutely. And kind of a strange thing is that when people by birth or by our lifestyle and nutrition or health or whatever, when we end up with very low GABA in our brain, as I did and was diagnosed by a very high-end neurologist, and that's how I found out about all of this. And he said, "You're my new poster child for a GABA deficient brain," because he did a very obscure type of brain scan that I think only 2 people in the country do. And he said, "Look at this," and I don't know what I'm looking at. And he said, "You're the new poster child for GABA deficiency." He says, "Your brain doesn't have any." So, that was kind of why I got interested in this whole thing. But so if you look from an evolutionary point of view about any species or creature, the deer, the butterfly, whatever, we all have that mix of we're on, we're off. It's sleep, it's wake, it's eat, it's digest, or then that small percentage of us is run like heck because something's trying to kill me, right? And that's how life is. I mean, for that deer grazing in my backyard, I can see him out the window right now. There's two big, beautiful antlered bucks back there. They've formed a little bro romance, brother. The bucks are hanging out together back in the backyard, which is kind of rare, but, and they're perfectly fine. But yes, if a loud noise happens or something comes crashing through the bushes or they hear a cougar growl, whatever, they obviously stop grazing, figure out the source of the stress, and then run like heck in the opposite direction. So the problem is that in our modern lives for humans, pretty much our whole life has become a threat. What we think, the hurricanes, the constant beeping and signaling on your pager and your Facebook page and your alarm clock, and you're late in traffic, and my gosh, what happens? I'll get fired and I'll starve to death if I'm late to work. And our rational minds are swamped with irrational events that we can't place in a rational system of pick it up, put it down, take a step. We're just too overwhelmed by choices, decisions, and inputs, all of which seem to have, massive consequences to us. And this is what exhausts us. It wears down our adrenals. It wears down the inhibitory neurotransmitters. And it leaves us exhausted, but wired up and anxious at the same time. And that classic phrase, wired and tired. I remember when I went in to see the doctor that worked with me and that I found, and I said, I'm wired and tired. He laughed. He said, yeah, you and like 45 million other people in this country. He said, but once we got into it, he says, wow, you weren't kidding. You're really wired and you're really tired.
So this idea of an outdated fight or flight system that was once adaptive when we were running from tigers, but in our days of a more abstract sense of danger or emergency, where we're not like physically burning off the stress chemistry by running away from something, that basically it's this really expensive and exhaustive process for our nervous systems. And is GABA something that gets depleted in that recovery process?
Yes, it just like anything else, it's nature and nurture, genetics and environment. Some of us are already born with a lower level or imbalance in these neurotransmitters, and a book that I refer people to, it's I say it on my many podcasts and so on. I say this is the best $12 I ever spent. I mean, whoever heard of an actually helpful book? It's only $12, and you can get it on Amazon or wherever used books may be. But it's called The Edge Effect. Like I'm on the edge here, folks. And so the edge effect, Dr. Braverman, that's the physician that I saw. But and by the way, don't go by his diet references because he didn't write those chapters. But anyway, the rest of it is pretty interesting and helpful. Part of his thing that I learned from him is that some of us already are, and there's tests in his little book to find out what type you are and then what type you're actually operating at. Like you may actually be a calm, happy type, but instead you're operating as a crazy person over here on this end. So yes, you may be born already with some low GABA, or it can manifest early on in life, or it can also be a process of just physically exhausting yourself. And there's a gluten and an autoimmune piece that sneaks in here too. Which I've found extremely rarely, but maybe two studies or even mentioned it, that the part of this something called GAD65, GAD65 enzyme, which is too technical, but anyway, it's important in the manufacture of GABA, and it can be a target of the gluten and autoimmune system. So that can play a part in all of this, and it's part of why I ask all my clients to basically get off gluten forever. And it's it's a bizarre man-made weed is what it is, which heavily pesticided and tinkered with and ground up and processed and colored and mashed. And, it's not food. It never was food for humans. We don't graze on grass tips. That's just not, that's not our style.
And you're saying that one of the things that it can do is it can trigger the body to go after GABA?
Yes, that GAD65 enzyme can be just like you can have autoantibodies against the thyroid hormone or whatever. So yes, your body can go after that.
Yeah. I think it's a really important thing for people to know, that a lot of times when we think about dietary sensitivities or allergies or things that we should be avoiding, that we're looking at things that solely are showing up in the digestive system, as opposed to in things that might have nothing to do with how you feel after you eat something, but have these subtler effects, or maybe not so subtle, but it can be harder to trace to the fact that it's food that is causing, for example, a mood disorder or amplifying inflammation and pain in the body.
One of my favorite blog posts that I wrote on my website is, I think it's 100 hidden symptoms of celiac disease. And at one point while I was writing it, I changed it to 200 and then to 300. I was like, okay, this post is going to get way too long. But when you get in there and start digging, a surprising statistic I found is that only 30% of people with diagnosed celiac disease ever report a digestive issue.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very, very neurological.
So interesting. It's an across-the-board recommendation that you make that people should avoid gluten if they're dealing with these kinds of symptoms.
Avoiding gluten anyway. Just like I don't want people to drink Gatorade or, I don't know, Count Chocula cereal, whatever. I put it right off in there on the let's get this out of the way off the bat is the gluten grains. And then I go on and go mostly grain-free too. But for sure I ask people to get gluten out. And that includes in their makeup and their hair care and their skin lotion and all these hidden sneaky places that we find gluten. I've got a lot more of that on my site too. So people can get some guidance about, well, gosh, it's in my pet kibble, and then I pour that 50-pound bag out, and then the dust goes all over the room. Yes, you just breathed gluten. You've just breathed gluten. It doesn't have to go in your mouth. It can go in your nose. It will still cause the same symptoms. So anyway, that's a little heads up on that.
Is there a way that we can increase the GABA in our lives through food?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't have the answer to that. Dr. Braverman has some of that in the Edge Effect, but in my own experience, and by the way, ask me again about where we can get it, because I don't want to forget that, but in supplements, I mean. Back to that, you can't fix tired until you fix wired. I'm sure you see that in your practice, and as I do, people are like, oh, I'm just so tired. What can I take? And as you get into it, it's like, well, you're not sleeping well. Your blood sugar is crashing because you're eating, fruit smoothies for breakfast. And, you woke up 12 times last night and, you've been studying for this PowerPoint presentation you have to do. And you're terrified you're going to get fired, whatever. All this stuff is on your mind and on your body. And you're exhausted because you're just wired to the max. So one of the first things you can do food-wise is get your blood sugar under control. And indeed, that's one of the first things people must do to get their tired adrenals, that lower cortisol, under control. And I do saliva tests for cortisol and estrogen and progesterone and DHEA. I run them on pretty much all of my clients. It's when people say, I'm tired, and then you get back your saliva test result and you're like, well, actually your cortisol is fine. So let's see what else is going on, with your immune system or your blood sugar or whatever. But you have to get your blood sugar managed and get on finding, sleep and peace mentally and physically. And that's where taking some GABA can also play a role. So yes, good proteins, good fats, good vegetables, a little fruit, and, not much else.
This episode is brought to you by 11 Weeks to Level Up Your Life, my self-care boot camp and support group. Are you tired of the integrity gap? That difference between what you should be doing to take care of yourself and actually doing it? If so, you really belong in this course. You'll be joining an incredible group of conscious people who are serious about upgrading their food choices, feeling more comfortable in their bodies, trading stress for ease, meditating daily, making time for what matters most, and coming into better alignment with their own values. There's only 2 or 3 slots left, so if you want in on this round, visit brodywelch.com and schedule your free discovery call. I'd love to talk to you. And I love that you brought that up, that you basically ducked my question about like, where can people get GABA, like from their diet, because it really is much more important to fix lifestyle first. And of course, diet is a piece of that, as you just mentioned, eating these, the sort of low glycemic load whole foods diet and making, I would add to that, making sure you can digest the food that you're eating, making sure that life isn't an emergency, getting a practice or a mindset that allows you to interpret what's coming at you in a way that isn't constantly triggering a stress response, and that's going to be the most important first step.
I like to tell people, especially people who are discouraged and depressed because they're sick and they're tired and they don't have a lot of money and this is all overwhelming and it's exhausting, and now I'm supposed to change my food, but I'm too tired to do that. I understand that. Believe me, I do. One big ray of hope, a big flag I like to wave at people is to remember that we get mad at our body and, we're just upset and mad that we have to do this. And I agree, but every cell in your body is programmed to win. It's programmed to live. It's programmed to do its job perfectly, unless it has a genetic flaw. And we don't have to make things happen. Our job is to let things happen. And this, of course, is the cornerstone of natural health practices, is that we don't force the issue with a drug or a surgery, and sometimes a drug or a surgery is exactly what you need. But the other times, letting the body figure it out and giving it the tools and resources and the time and the space and the love to respond, like in acupuncture, right? I mean, you as the practitioner do your thing, but your patient's body there responds. It takes the hint. It goes, oh, I'm supposed to do this.
Exactly.
So we are programmed to succeed, but you have to take that, that burden off of your mind and your body, and taking GABA in the forms of a couple of things that work, passion flower for one. But again, I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Remind me again. But yeah. I just want to talk about how important it is, because this is something we are not trained to do, that we have to take charge of and acknowledge that one of our own individual, personal, major flaws in personality is that we don't regulate our thinking. We're like panic monkeys, right? We don't know how to use our rational minds unless it's some kind of a math problem I have to figure out, or, if I have to get from here to Idaho, how much food do I need to pack or whatever. But I mean, our rational minds, like, okay, that phone call, I notice I'm really upset right now. I can feel my heart pounding. I want to kill that person. All right, let's think what I need to do now. And we have to train ourselves to monitor what is going on in your head and your body, and how can I use my rational mind to decode this. Is it really the end of the world if you missed your traffic exit and you're going to be 10 minutes late to the movies? Okay, maybe your friend leaves because you didn't show up, but okay, is it really the end of your friendship? I mean, that's where we go. And that's evolutionary too. If we wouldn't be here, like those deer in the backyard, they wouldn't be here if they ignored a quote unquote danger sign.
And with our evolutionary brains, like we can cultivate a mindfulness practice where we can become aware of our worries and our habituated negative thoughts and be able to interfere so that we're not just perpetuating that.
Yeah, and quickly, when you're scared, angry, tired, wired, late, rushing, whatever, to be able to say, okay, I'm lying here in bed. What is going on? And it's like, all right, I'm just really upset about that phone call. Okay, well then sit up for a minute and think your way through, and maybe jot a note down in the dark. Don't turn on the light. Your light will, all your melatonin goes away with exposure to light. Sort your way through. Okay, I need to ask so-and-so about this, and then I need to check this, and okay, fine. You use some rational brain and put that stuff physically aside, and then do a little breathing, count some sheep, do what you need to do. Counting backwards from 1,000 by sevens is my personal favorite sleep trick. I will pass that along.
Yeah, I was just speaking with a neurologist who was talking about how one of the best ways of getting out of an anxious state is actually to engage the left brain in, like, he mentioned his wife doing calculus problems and finding that was like a cure for her anxiety. Super interesting little correlation there.
Yeah, try to list the states up and down the East Coast and across the bottom and up the West Coast of the United States. And, whatever. You make up any kind of a math game or a puzzle game. And the other big one, obviously, for sure, is body awareness. Focus on your right toes. Focus on your right big toe. Focus on your right instep. And you've taken your mind away from the what if I get fired, and you're just focusing on your right toe. You can feel the sheet on there. You can feel the edge of your pajamas. Whatever it is, your mind just goes, oh, nuts, and it just shuts down. It doesn't want to go through all of that. It's too much work.
I do want to circle back to where can people get GABA? You mentioned passion flower. It's not the kind of thing that you're going to see on like an ingredient list, right? Like it's not so much like we can just take this supplement directly and have it influence our chemistry.
Yes, actually you can.
You can, okay.
But remember, first of all, that your body makes your neurotransmitters. So the healthier your gut, the more you've gotten the gluten and the inflammation and the nasty toxic foods out and done your work to heal your leaky gut, the more you can do to help your body make your own neurotransmitters. That's number one. But in the meanwhile, there's two ways to buy a supplement that will have the GABA name on it. The cheap kind of drugstore Walgreens $4.99 GABA, theoretically that does not work. The amino acid is not structured in a way that it can cross the blood-brain barrier. But one weird thing is if cheap ordinary GABA works for you, you've heard of leaky gut, but there's also leaky lung and leaky brain. So if ordinary cheap GABA works for you, that's actually a sign that you may have a little leaky brain, and that substance, which is not supposed to cross the blood-brain barrier, can. So. But
what is leaky brain? I don't know that I've heard that term.
It's what it sounds like. Your brain is extremely diligent about what chemicals or infectious cells or, what goes in. I mean, your brain's a big chunk of fat, right? So it's not a circulatory system. And yet, for example, we have to make melatonin and get melatonin up into the brain. And, there's things that have to get up in there. And of course, the neurotransmitters are firing away up there. But ordinary things, just like leaky gut, there's things don't have the passcode to be allowed through. So it's a little more technical, but I have had people say, boy, that stuff did nothing for me. And other people say, oh no, that was great. I was so relaxed. And I had to do some research on why is that?
All right. So if you're taking cheap GABA and it has an effect, it may be kind of a sign that there's a bigger problem to address in the form of leaky brain.
That's right. So you better get to work on your leaky gut. And
all right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But then the type of product that if you see its name with the word pharma, like big pharma, PHARMA, Pharma GABA. So Pharma GABA has a little tweak in its chemistry that should allow it to cross the blood-brain barrier. So if you want to buy an actual GABA supplement, Pharma GABA is where you go with that. In my clinic, I've got 600 or 700 nutritional supplements in there. I've only got like 35 in my online store. So there's a world of stuff out there. But passion flower it's a weed. It's a wild flower that grows on fences in Texas, for example. In my opinion, it's one of the most beautiful flowers on the planet. Just Google that up, passion flower image, and it's just extraordinarily gorgeous. But anyway, passion flower as an herbal tincture, I'm actually not clear chemically if it's providing some actual raw form of GABA or if it's providing all the precursors. But for whatever reason, GABA is the passion flower. Passion flower is your best GABA way, and it doesn't work for everybody. It's just one thing to try. It often comes in capsules, alcohol, herbal tinctures, and glycerin herbal tinctures. And I've got both of the tinctures in the online store, but we sell 500 to 1 of the one in glycerin, and I like that farm that we sell because it's a small, hands-on, like we're not answering the phone, we're out mulching the herb beds kind of a place. I like their passion flower, and in glycerin is a non-nutritive sweetener, so that you can just take a squirt of that passion flower while you're flying down the highway, or keep it under your pillow and take a couple squirts during the night when you're restless. And you don't have to get up and get a glass of water like you do with the alcohol tinctures because, they're kind of too hot or whatever in the mouth. So passion flower is number one where we send people, and basically you'll see it on the blog. But you can use as much as you like. The worst that would happen is you decide that you really need a nap. And so it's non-addictive, etc. And it can be given to children and the elderly. And then chamomile has a very much of a GABA type of property. Also, California poppy. Then there's the nervines like valerian and skullcap. They have a GABA activity, but they're also more directly nervines, which means they're like sedatives. Whether they're
right, they're going to have a much heavier effect on the body and potentially make you feel more tired.
Yes, especially if you take too much. But there are quite a few supplements that mix and match. Some tryptophan and some passion flower and some valerian and some chamomile and some Pharma GABA.
Some of my favorite formulas from Banyan Botanicals, which is an Ayurvedic company that does things right on a global scale. They have Tranquil Mind and I Sleep Soundly, both of which involve passion flower and a synergy of other herbs. Passion flower it's an Ayurvedic herb, and it's a Chinese herb as well that we think about in Chinese medicine for the liver. And it's classically indicated for things like insomnia, calming the spirit, and descending the liver yang. So that would be true for things like seizures as well. So really interesting that Chinese medicine kind of had knows that as well as that turns out to be its Western effects.
Yeah, and if passion flower by itself doesn't work, try a different kind of a combination, whatever. But these things are safe to play with. They're not generally expensive. You can, play with them. They may work great for your spouse, and that one didn't work for you, and he hands you his bottle and you take his, and you're like, oh, good, this one does work for me. And, you can play with these things. And the prescriptive form of drugs that work with the GABA neurotransmitter are either the anti-epileptics, the seizure drugs, things like Depakote and Lamictal and gabapentin, Neurontin, Keppra. These drugs work in the GABA domain, but then also here's where Valium and Xanax come in, and then they are addictive. And then the other way to go is heroin, marijuana, and alcohol. They all have an impact on the GABA receptors in the brain. And this is one of the things I learned from Dr. Braverman's book, The Edge Effect, that as your GABA deficiency gets more and more and more pronounced, you go through various stages of pain, all kinds of pain, fibromyalgia and TMJ and migraines and all these different kind of pain things. But that ultimately when you get really, really depleted in GABA, we will turn to heroin, alcohol, and marijuana because they do work in that domain. So,
which makes so much sense, right? Like if you're chronically stressed, you're going to look for a chemical that's going to help downshift your nervous system, and that your brain's going to want that.
Yeah, and look at all the amazing things from, medical marijuana and CBD oil and other people just doesn't work on for whatever reason. Not everything works for everybody in every way. So you do have to kind of play with stuff, not the drugs, but you play with the non-drug things and find what works while you're working on training your commitment to being more rational in your life. And there's just no escaping that until you developed the ability to monitor your mind, like, whoa, what was that thought? And did I really just think, well, that's just the end of it. I'm just going to have to leave him or whatever, like, whoa, now wait a second. That was a random thought. Let's just back that up. And where did that come from? How do I be more rational about this issue and make a more correct judgment or decision about things?
All really good advice. I feel like I've learned a lot from this conversation. Is there anything that you want to add?
The other one of my many mottos for my podcast, food first is one, but grow up is one. And that's part of that rational thing is, first of all, if you're not going to the doctor because doctors are bad, aren't they? Well, no, grow up. When you need to go to the doctor, you need doctors. I have probably 10 doctors that I see in some kind of a rotation for various things. And I'm not happy about it, but that's what I do. And, when I need my chiropractor, that's fine. Or I need my osteopath, that's fine. But I have other kinds of physicians that work with me for various things, like my partial seizure disorder, whatever. One of my other mottos is test, don't guess. And that is just so important. You can go online and order your own adrenal saliva hormone test, and they're not expensive. They're easy to interpret. Or if you're natural, more functionally oriented practitioners often use salivary cortisol and estrogen and progesterone tests by saliva. And then learn the correct way to blood test your thyroid and the correct way to blood test your testosterone. That's something that's a shocking number of doctors do not run the right blood work. And you can find consumer labs and go and run your own blood tests. You just need to know what to ask for. So saliva tests and proper blood work, you can do these things without having to have a physician and get some clues for yourself. Test, don't guess. And don't start taking a bunch of energy, quote unquote, energy stuff like coffee and, hyper exercise, much less random energy supplements, adrenal or otherwise. If the true cause is that, you're anxious, you're exhausted, you're not sleeping well, and you're basically not well. And, you can't put a stimulant on top of fatigue. You can support the adrenals, but you don't want to stimulate them. You want to feed them and repair them. And I write a lot about that too. So that's a whole other topic.
Excellent. Remind us where we can find you online.
The website is On Diet and Health, ondietandhealth.com. That's my Pinterest page, which is very active. And the podcast is Primal Diet, Modern Health. And so, I've been podcasting 5 years. So
awesome.
Love to have people join me and dig through the search bar on my website. There's stuff. There's so many things on there. Bunions, gallbladders, whatever. There's all kinds of stuff on there. So just go and get to work. Use that search bar.
Awesome. Yeah. And I've been digging around on your website, found a lot of interesting things. So definitely, it's an incredible resource. Beverly Meyer, thank you so much for joining me today on Healthy Curiosity.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.